Now to the state of the cannabis industry. People who have invested in cannabis have been very patient, only to find that MJ, the very popular ETF, has been at 52-week lows. To talk about this industry, Andrew Hunzicker is with us, CEO of DOPE, CFO, Certified Advisors. Thank you for being with us. You know, I know so many people who were heavily invested in the cannabis industry, only to find the hurdles from money not being available for growth and regulatory hurdles. In fact, even in the most popular places, in your notes, you noted names like Colorado and Washington, where sales are declining. Was it hot and then not? What's going on?
Well, overall, on the good news side, the industry is growing rapidly. If you just look in the U.S., 10 years ago, we were completely illegal. Colorado legalized. We've seen it spread now to 47 states. That will continue to grow both globally as well as in the U.S. Now, when you talk about these publicly traded stocks, that's not yet allowed in the U.S. because cannabis is still federally illegal. And so we look at these companies in Canada like Tilray or the ETFs where people can get access to a few of these bigger names. Yes, they have not performed well. Most of them are losing very large amounts of money. But even if we look in the U.S. markets, whether it's where the big growth areas of the East Coast, you're still seeing investors go in and having to be very careful because markets, it's kind of like the Wild West. So where I am in Oregon, we've seen many wildly successful companies, but we've seen many go under. And so these companies need to be well funded from day one. Most of the investors coming into the private markets in the U.S. are betting on 280E and descheduling of cannabis, which we expect to happen as well, whether it's a year out or 3 years out. At the end of the day, 8 out of 10 Americans want access to medical cannabis. And I say when 8 out of 10 Americans agree on anything, it will likely happen. And I think that's why we've seen this movement grow rapidly. So even though there's up and downs in the equity cycles and capital coming in, the cannabis market itself is growing almost at the hockey stick growth, and that will continue.
All right, so the demand is there. You are seeing it growing, particularly there's medical and recreation. I think more and more people are on board, at least with the medical side, but you do have a few hurdles such as the regulatory environment and legislation. I know there was a big vote that came up, and then after the midterm elections, there was basically one last chance, and then you got to be in this pause mode. But getting capital, particularly banks are not able, federal reasons are not able to supply these cannabis companies, but some may be better positioned than others, whether it's if they're a grower and whether they transform it and distribute it. There's Canada, there's US, there's parts. I mean, you don't have to have the whole kit and caboodle. What kind of companies are better positioned than others? I don't know if you can name names, but if someone is interested in investing in cannabis, what do you tell them?
Well, on a personal level, I would still, the public companies, I mean, you can look at some of these annual reports like Tilray, for example, they lose money hand over fist. And so I'm not going to be investing in some of these bigger names. I think you can actually get profitability if you go in the private way, almost angel investing in your local markets or state markets. There's plenty of opportunities to invest in smaller funds or just personally invest in a startup of a farm or a dispensary, et cetera. Now, as far as the tax hurdles around 280E, that is a very punitive part of the tax code. The farmers and the product manufacturers get more benefits out of the tax code. It's much harder for dispensaries and MSOs to be profitable because of the punitive tax code, where these companies in the U.S. at least are not allowed to take any deductions on their tax return if they're not doing correct level cost accounting. And so we tell people if you're investing in a company, first and foremost, make sure they are very well capitalized, whether they're private equity backed or they just have a group of angel investors. They're going to go through up and down swings that are pretty massive. It reminds me of the oil and gas industry where I was for a big part of my career. I've seen that in Oregon 3 times. We've had massive price crashes and then upswings, and so you've got to be able to survive those downturns when the price of, say, a pound of flour in Oregon goes between 2,000 all the way down to 300 or 200 a pound. It gets very tricky surviving those difficult times.
Right, and when you mention a name like Tilray or Curaleaf or MJ, is there a time to get involved? Would you recommend that people do this slowly? Because as you said, they're losing money hand over fist, but at the same time, if you're a true believer in the growth of cannabis, wouldn't you put some money to work even dollar cost averaging or a little at a time? Or are you really waiting for some more federal legalization or okays either here or abroad?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of a skeptic. So on the industry itself, yes, a great time to dollar cost average, spread your bets out, because some of these companies are not well run. When you have a new industry, we're seeing this in crypto as well. You get a lot of bad actors, even at big companies, poor internal controls, poor corporate governance, poor accounting. We say first and foremost to any cannabis company who's raising capital or coming into the space, or investors, hey, make sure they've got a world-class CFO on board. It's not an afterthought as well. But you're right, you could dollar cost average if you truly believe, like I do, that this will be fully federally legal in the U.S. Right now, there's a bill in Congress to deschedule cannabis, like we saw with hemp and CBD. Hemp and CBD were legal overnight. The same can happen for cannabis nationally. And when that happens, I think you're going to see a big pop, valuations going from very low to maybe way too high quickly. Yeah. And so there is some definite upside there if you're a believer in this movement going fully legal.
Right, but it doesn't sound like you're an MJ fan that you would pick it up at 52-week lows, like scoop it up maybe a little bit. And there was these sideways ways to do it. You could do Scott's Miracle Grow. There was one of the beverage makers, STZ, right? I mean, they had some exposure. There were sort of some sideways, just like Bitcoin. I mean, their main business is not pot stocks or cannabis, but they have some exposure. Final quick 10 seconds, Andrew?
Yeah, so the picks and shovels always win, and so ancillary companies, whether it's lighting or growers or equipment makers, those will be big winners as well because they don't have to deal with the tax issues. But yes, big believer in the industry. It's growing. We all want access to this medicine, which is much better than the opiate crisis we're experiencing, and so I think that's why this movement's growing.
Yeah. Andrew Hunzicker, thank you, CEO of DOPE, CFO Certified Advisors. Thank you.